So I've been thinking a lot about Into the Wild lately and how this book and movie was really inspirational to me in so many ways. Like Chris McCandless, I was in my 20s and just trying to figure out what to do. And I read his book and about his travels, and I kind of agreed with the idea that I think something like what he did would be good for me. I wasn't going to go out and try to live on my own in Alaska like he did. And I think that's maybe something useful we can get from that book. There's a lot of criticism of Chris going out and doing that. Some people say he didn't have respect for nature or respect for the Alaskan wilderness. And maybe there's some truth to that. And I think that watching the movie especially and seeing visually what it's like to go out and starve in a place like Alaska made me think, okay, I don't know if I need to be that extreme, but I want to go out, and while I can, while I'm healthy, while I have the ability, I want to go out and see a lot of America. I didn't even want to go out internationally, really. I wanted to see the West, especially. In the fall of, it was Labor Day weekend, 2011, I decided I was flying out to Maine, and I was going to rent a bike in Portland, Maine, and I was just going to go wherever the hell I wanted for that Labor Day weekend. So I did that. I bought $152, $200, I believe, round trip ticket to Portland, Maine. Flew out there from New York City. And I said, I'm not taking a cab. I'm not renting a car. I'm just going to walk out of the airport and I'm going to find a bike rental place and I'm going to rent a bike and I'm just going to go around and on a bike and just do what I want. And that's pretty much what I did. I flew into Portland, Maine. I got off the airport. It was kind of like late afternoon or early evening. And I said to somebody there, hey, how do I get to Portland if I want to walk? And they said, well, it's like 5 miles, 6 miles or something like that. I said, okay, I'm just going to walk from the airport. Why the hell not? I mean, I could take a cab, but why not just walk? I have all the time in the world to do it. So that's what I'm going to do. And I remember seeing the sunset and just walking out of the airport. I had never done anything like that before. I'm born and raised in New York City. City kid growing up. And it was just great. I still remember that walk. Do you remember all the different walks you've done Well, I remember that one. Just because I did it. Walked out of the airport. Finally, in the evening, I made it to Portland, Maine, and I had no plan. And the bike rental place, I believe it was closed already. Yeah, it was closed. And just walking around Portland, I find like a place that's like a music venue, and just kind of walk in, watch a show. I think I got something to eat. It was a pretty good show. Just kind of getting a sense of Portland, Maine. And then I'm like, well, I don't even want to go to a hotel. What if I just decide to sleep on the street in Portland? Now, I had beforehand gone to like Wiki Travel, which is kind of like a Wikipedia for travel. And maybe it was written by like the city of Portland, but it said, oh yeah, Portland's such a safe city. There's not a lot of crime, something like that. Keep in mind, this is 2011. We're kind of like at the early part of like the smartphone era. The internet's still kind of a new thing. You can't just expect like all the information you need is on the internet. Kind of still a different time in regards to that. Didn't have all the resources on the internet we have now. So I kind of believe this. Anyway, I go out and it's getting to be late at night, and I find like a church in Portland, and I said, all right, I'll just kind of like set up shop here. I have no suitcases, just a backpack with some clothes and other things like toothbrush, and I just lay down on the church steps. And so like right away as I do that, there's like a spotlight on me, and I like open my eyes and there's a police car there, and I just get up right away and just start walking away. I don't know if they saw me or they were looking for me or warning me, but I just got up from where I was. I'm like, all right, I guess this isn't going to work out. I don't want to get like arrested or fined or anything like that. I want to keep a real low profile on this trip. So I decide to get up and walk some ways from like, you know, the downtown part of Portland, and find somewhere else to sleep, like in a more isolated area where there's maybe not so many people. Not that there were a lot of people, but maybe just somewhere where the police wouldn't easily find me. So I'm walking down these roads. I actually walk past like the minor league stadium for Portland minor league baseball team, and its game is finishing up. I walk past there. I pretty much walk to the outskirts of Portland, I believe. I didn't really know where I was. Still don't know where I was. And I remember passing another traveler, and I could tell by his backpack, he had a heavy like camping backpack, that he was another traveler like me, like backpacking. And I remember feeling like kind of a sense of fear. We just kind of crossed paths, and you know, like, hey, you know, hope you're not dangerous. I'm not dangerous. Maybe you're wondering if I am, but Hope you're not. I think I was carrying cash for most of this trip. I don't remember. It's getting late at night. I've never done anything like this. Feeling a little apprehensive of the environment I'm in. Maybe Portland is not as safe as Wiki Travel said. It certainly doesn't feel that way. It doesn't look that way. And I find some kind of office building on the outskirts of Portland, and there's like major road or a highway nearby. And since it's Labor Day weekend, I figure there's probably nobody around. And I just kind of sat against the outside of the building, sat down right there on the grass with my back against the exterior wall of the office building, and I went to sleep for a few hours. Okay, so I'd like to say that was my first night sleeping under the stars, but I'll admit, this being the first time I did this, I woke up at some point, maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'm looking around. I'm seeing like some empty vodka bottles or something like that, wine bottles, beer bottles, stuff like that. Like evidence that like some, people have been out here, whether, people, kids, teenagers, or vagrants, homeless people. I'm hearing the cars pass by on the highway, and it kind of freaked me out. And I decided I wasn't going to do this. I stand up, I walk around a little bit, and I see there's like a Comfort Inn or a Holiday Inn, some kind of budget hotel nearby. And I give up on the idea of sleeping under the stars in Portland. So I don't. I get my backpack and I just get up out of there, and I walk to like the whatever the budget motel was, and I get a room and sleep there that night, and that's the end of that. So I didn't do it. It was no Alexander Supertramp for my first night on this kind of trip. So, wake up the next morning. I think I looked up where a bike rental place was in Portland. I head back to Portland, walking the whole way. I walk back into Portland, Maine. I think I got some breakfast. I remember being at some kind of nice breakfast place, getting pancakes or something. I knew I was going to be on the road, and was talking to a guy sitting next to me. We were talking about New York. I think he had said he had been to New York, Brooklyn, where I was spending a lot of time in those days. Nice little chat. And then I headed out. I found the bike rental place. Found out it was just like, I don't remember how much, 20, 25. It was like $20 to $40 a day. Maybe it was less, like 20 a day or something. I got a nice bike. I believe it was a road bike. Rented it for the Labor Day weekend, and I was off to the races. Now I had heard that there was this thing called the Eastern Trail, that it was a bike trail that was going to go from Maine all the way to Florida. Now, I only gave myself Labor Day weekend for this whole trip, just, like 3 days. So I knew I wasn't going to go there. My goal was to get to Portsmouth in New Hampshire, right over the border from Maine in New Hampshire. I thought that was a worthy goal. I had some maps. Now, I didn't use, I think we had like all the modern GPS that, we didn't really have apps. I didn't have a smartphone at this time. But anyway, I was going by maps, good old-fashioned paper maps. I had a bunch of them. I think I bought a couple of local maps in Maine. So you go to a gas station back then, there would be like a rack full of maps, or books with maps in them. So that's what I used. And I determined heading to south from Portland to Portsmouth, New Hampshire was a worthy goal. And so that was really like the only goal I had at that time. And I was going to take the Eastern Trail. It was supposedly like a bike trail that went all the way to Florida. And I was going to take it down to Portsmouth. So I got on the bike and, using the map, I headed down there. And I got to say, I'm heading through Portland. I get into like a suburb. I believe it was called South Portland. I got over some kind of bridge from Portland to South Portland. So now I'm kind of like, back on. I'm on this thing, right? I found the Eastern Trail. Actually, I remember the Casco Bay Bridge, I believe it was. And I head over it, and I'm looking for the Eastern Trail. And I asked somebody, and they're like, well, it's right over there. And it was right near me, and I got on it. And there was just this feeling, right? There was this amazing feeling that, like, it's all unlimited for me. Like I could, if I wanted to, I could just bike all the way to Florida. I could bike all the way to California. Like, I probably wouldn't make it, or something would happen. But whatever, just the feeling that this whole country, that this whole world is out before me, was just an amazing feeling when I crossed over that bridge. Like, I already did it, right? I already flew out from New York. I already walked to Portland from the airport. And now it's all out before me, right? I'm not going to be Chris McCandless and go to Alaska and starve to death. At least I hope not. But listen, not making fun of him. Very inspirational to me in my own way. Whatever you think of him, Chris, I love what he did, and great. The story is great, and thanks to John Krakauer for bringing it out to the wider world. Okay, this was mine. So I'm on the road. I'm heading out. I'm going through all these towns. I go through South Portland. It's just kind of a suburb. It's nothing eventful. I'm heading out. I mean, just, I remember so much about that day, and I'm going along the southern coast of Maine. My memory's getting a little hazy, but whatever. I just going through these towns, and I loved it. I just loved every minute of it, going through the coast, sometimes seeing the beach, stopping along these beaches. Some things I remember, some kind of beach, and I'm just seeing all these guys, collecting seaweed. I just asked them, what are you doing? Why are you collecting seaweed? And they told me they were using it for a clam bake that they were having. Just a random memory. I never saw anybody collecting seaweed before. I didn't even know why you would do that. These are just some of the things and experiences you have when you just go out on the road. I remember eventually I got to Orchard Beach. I think it was on that first day. Discovered just this lovely beach town, kind of like a Jersey Shore beach town with things to do there, and like, of course, a beach to go to, and I think it had a boardwalk. And I found out this is a place people go to in Maine to just in the summer go to the beach and experience that. And you know, I didn't go in the water, but I just remember just sitting on the sand there, and just fucking awesome, you know. And I get back on the bike, and my first day, I think I drove biked, cycled, whatever you call it, 60 something miles, 40 miles, I don't remember, something like that. Significant trip. And it's you know, I'm feeling evening. It's kind of the late summer, Labor Day weekend, and the sun is starting to set. And some people saw me on the road. I'm in a town, I think it was Welch, still in Maine. And, or maybe that was my second night. Wherever it was, some people they see me and they say, you know, listen, you know, you got to get off the road, because this isn't a big city where you can have like street lights and things like that. You know, they were warning me, it's dangerous. You got to find a place to get off the road. So I'm biking a little more, and I think I saw a sign for a campground, and I had never been to a campground before. And I said, all right, well, rather than just trying to sleep out in the wild, because that kind of freaked me out completely, like against a tree or an office building or something, or in a town. So let me find this campground. So I saw some like 12-year-old kids on their bikes, and I asked them, I said, hey, do you know where the campground is? And they, you know, gave me some directions, and they said, well, it's like right over here, you know, you're right there. And it really wasn't. And that's something I learned too on a lot of my travels, that, you know, people's conception of distance differs from place to place. Anyway, you know, the sun was setting, it was getting late at night, but I finally found the campground. It was like a real small campground, you know, kind of nondescript, just some places for RVs, and you know, a few spots. I got to the office and they asked me, you know, what do you need? And I said, well, I'm just here with my bike. And they said, okay, you could just get a little patch of land. You know, don't need any hookup. We don't need anything like that. Nothing for an RV. So I paid like $20. And they just, you know, gave me a little patch of land. It had a picnic table on it. And I think they had like a vending machine. I got like some, I don't know, potato chips or granola bars. There were no like stores or restaurants around me. And I just set up shop there. Now, I didn't even have a tent at this time. I figured, well, it's Labor Day weekend. It's still the summer. I'm just going to sleep outside. And that's what I did. So this was my first night ever sleeping outside. I just got onto the picnic table and, you know, used my backpack as a pillow and started to, you know, just, I'm going to sleep here tonight. Now, the funny thing was, I didn't realize how cold it was going to get. It got pretty cold. Now, I was in like a t-shirt and shorts throughout the day, but maybe because it's Maine, it got really cold at night, that I remember. And I just remember putting on all the clothes that I had, that I brought from the trip. I just layered myself up. I think I had like some sweatpants, and I was still pretty cold, but I made it through the night. And that was great. And woke up, and turns out like some local church or something like that was having a pancake breakfast at the campsite. So I went to that, and these guys were just out there, and they had a griddle or something like that, and they were just cooking up pancakes, and I paid like $3 or something like that, and I had all these pancakes and sat with some people at the table, and I think we talked about like, our travels, other campers or travelers. And I just got my bike, I checked out. I think I remember the girl at the office, she knew I was on some kind of trip. I think maybe I told her a little bit about it. I'm just traveling down southern coast of Maine, and she said something like, have a great trip, enjoy your journey. And I mean, just so fucking cool, it's just melancholy just thinking of this, those days. So get back on the bike, and I'm traveling down. One thing I got to say about the Eastern Trail is that I found out that, it wasn't completely complete at this time. It was in sections. So I think it had different sponsors in different places for the trail. And there were definitely places where it wasn't available. Like, I would be cycling down it, and it would be some old, I think, rail trail, or abandoned railroad tracks had been made into a trail, and I wouldn't have to look for traffic or anything. But then there were definitely places where, like, I was out on just regular streets, just traveling with cars around me. But I had my map, and I stayed on the southern coast and just kept traveling through these towns. I think it was on my second day I got to Kennebunkport. And as some of you may know, that was the Bush family, which presidents of the United States Bush family. They had a compound there. And I remember somebody told me there that actually President Bush, President Clinton, I think President Carter had just been there the weekend before. And both senior George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr., I think, had been there the weekend before. I went through Kennebunkport, nice little town. And I traveled as far as I could that day. I did not make it to Portsmouth. I made it to some other town. I can't remember the name. I found another campground. This time, what happened then? Well, yeah, I did not make it to Portsmouth, and then I traveled as far as I could go, and I had to turn around, and then, because it was Sunday, and I traveled back to Portland, and stopped at some other town. I can't remember the exact itinerary, but I remember for the second night, I found a big campground. This one had like a pool. This one was full of people, and I stopped there for the night. I mean, there must have been like thousands of people. I mean, just a great Labor Day weekend, people camping, all kinds of RVs and things like that. And this place, it had like, I think an actual like, place you could go to get actual food, like fried chicken and things like that. Oh yeah, also I'll mention there were like, in Maine, lobsters are a big deal. A lot of places, like, you could find like fast food places that sold lobster. I think this place had lobster rolls and things like that. It's a big deal out in Maine. Stayed there and once again slept outside for the second night in a row. This time I was a little more prepared for the cold. I found a tree at my campsite, set my backpack down as a pillow and just slept there for the night. Woke up the next morning early, I think 6 or 7 in the morning, to head back to Portland and just kind of hang out. I think that Monday, actual Labor Day, was my flight back to New York in the evening. So I cycled back to Portland, hung around Portland on Labor Day. There wasn't really much going on. It was Labor Day weekend. I think I found like one of these old bookstores and these musty used bookstores, and just kind of like hung out there and returned my bike. Even the bike shop was closed, and they had already known I was coming back on Labor Day, so they just had me chain it up and walked around for a little bit, looked at Portland. I think there was a tour of one of the lighthouses in Portland, and I remember I enjoyed that. I went up all the stairs of the lighthouse, and there was a tour guide, and just me and one other person, and learned a little bit about the history of that and about Portland itself. I think before I took the bike back, actually, I tried to travel around some of the other towns outside of Portland. I asked somebody if there was anything else to do. Oh yeah, I went to some kind of museum, I believe, for the light rail in Portland, and I think I took the light rail for a while. Just kind of explored it. Like museums, things like that, shopping centers. And that was my last day in Portland. And then I just took a flight back that night to New York City, and that was the end of that. So, let's see here. Am I going to break this up or talk about the next year? Well, I have some time, so I will, I'll start off on, well, that was my trip to Portland. That was my, first time out doing something like that. My kind of trip, like an on the road, into the wild kind of experience. I just really wanted to do something like that. Now, I got a little taste of it, but, I think it was Chris who said something like, if you're going to go out there, the West is best. Right? So I wanted to find a way to go out west. California, Arizona, New Mexico, Wyoming. I was looking at a lot of these different states. And, I wanted to go out on a bike again. I had a completely awesome experience just being out on the bike. I mean, it's faster than walking. You can cover a lot more miles. But at the same time, I feel like I'm in all these places. I'm getting all the sights and sounds. the whole feel of every place I'm at. Like, I'm on there, but a lot faster than walking. So, I spend that time the next year, like heading into 2012, where I'm just kind of figuring out, like, I know I'm going to go out west somewhere, but I don't know where. And I want it to be like another trip like that, not really having a big itinerary, just kind of like, going out there. My version of Into the Wild. And so what happened was that I was 2012, early in 2012, I get the opportunity from a company to get a trip, a business trip out to Chicago, or the Chicago area. And, it's all paid for. They pay for the hotel. I had some work to do out there. I head out for I think it was a few days out to Chicago. And I'm working most of the time. I was actually staying in a town in the suburbs called Schaumburg, and at a hotel there. But one night I found the time after work to just go and take a train into Chicago. And I did that. I didn't, again, just kind of found my way to Chicago, asked people how to get there, took the train, got off somewhere in Chicago, and, I was off to the races again, and, just spent a night walking through Chicago, had some Chicago-style pizza. It wasn't easy to find it. Oh, well, anyway, that's not the main trip I want to talk about. The main reason I'm mentioning this was that when I was at actually flying out to Chicago, my trip got delayed. Okay, so it was supposed to be at 7 o'clock in the morning from New York to Chicago, and it got delayed by half an hour. And the airline sent me some kind of apology. They're like, oh, sorry that your trip got delayed. Here's $500, I think it was. They gave me credit for something like that. It was at least a few $100s, maybe 300. Maybe it was more like 300. Can't remember. But anyway, I went to Chicago, and that was cool. Mostly a business trip. But as a result of the airlines, making the mistake that they did, I had a few $100s to go somewhere. I had credit from the airlines. So I said, I'm going to go somewhere where I don't have to pay anything to get there. And I looked at all these places out west, and most were too expensive. California was, I wanted to go to the Salton Sea like Chris McCandless did, and Slab City, and maybe take a bike out there from, I was researching a bike trip from LA to the Salton Sea. And, it seemed like something I could do. I wanted to go on a real epic trip out west. But that would have been too much money. And I looked at Jackson Hole in Wyoming, and I thought about, just going to one of these parks and hanging out, or going to Moab in southern Utah, and, going to all the parks there and camping out there. But they were all too expensive. And I really wanted to stick to just this kind of low tech and, not spending money and, that kind of thing. Primitive, I was into that. So I found that I could fly out to Salt Lake City all on the credit I received from the airline. So I decided to do that. When I finally decided to do that, the summer was already over. It was past Labor Day weekend. And I booked my trip for October 2012. And I flew out to Salt Lake City. And it had a stopover in Denver, which was cool, just a few hours in Denver. And already, I'm getting the feeling this is going to be one of my greatest trips ever. I'm just completely on my own. I'm going out west. I'm doing it, right? I did it. I went out to Portland and had all this amazing time. Here I am over 10 years later, and I'm recounting all these details of that 3-day trip. I just knew, already I'm in Denver, Colorado. I'm stopping at the airport there, and I'm flying to Salt Lake City. I'm on the flight to Salt Lake City, and I'm looking at the red mountains there surrounding Salt Lake City in the valley, and it's already great. It's already great. I touched down in Salt Lake City in the airport, and unfortunately, I had to break my rule about motorized travel, because I asked at the airport, I said, is there a way for me to walk from Salt Lake City, from the airport to Salt Lake City? And they said, not really, it's all highways. So I found a bus, a municipal bus, that I took to Salt Lake City. Okay, no big deal. And I arrived. I was a little more acquainted with, the GPS and looking up things. Things were really changing around this time in terms of technology. I don't think I had a smartphone at that time, but I was able to find out where things were with GPS and how to use GPS. I might have used it to find Salt Lake City bike rental. I did get into Salt Lake City, and I found the bike rental place. I rented a great Trek bike for the week. So I'll mention too, on this trip, I was planning to be there for I think it was 5 or 6 days. So not just a long weekend this time. I was giving myself a lot more time in Utah than I did in Maine. So I rented the bike, and I had already known that there was a KOA campground right in Salt Lake City. You don't really, at least I don't think you normally find campgrounds, full-blown campgrounds, right in the middle of a major city, but there was one in Salt Lake City, KOA campground. I biked there from Salt Lake City bike rental and found the campground and just rented a spot just like I did in Maine. Now this was another huge campground, just full of RVs and people. I remember I talked to my neighbors. They had a little camper, and they had told me that they had just been down at Zion and Arches, and they were raving about those parks. And that does seem like what most people do when they go to travel out to Utah. They more go out to that part, the south part of Utah, and Moab and Arches and all those places, and these people were just raving about it, and I totally get it. Now this year I had gone out to Paragon, and I had bought a tent. I had bought cooking utensils. I came prepared with packets of oatmeal, and For the first time, I set up a tent. I set up my tent all by myself. Got it ready. There wasn't a fire pit for me to cook anything. So I was in Salt Lake City, so I went out. I actually went to like a restaurant and got some dinner. Came back. I slept in the tent, which was the first time I ever did that. I remember, sleeping in the tent and, kind of hearing like, some of the sounds of the night, like a train. I think there was train tracks nearby, and I heard the train passing. It's kind of different with your ear to the ground. So that was fun. I made sure to wake up early the next morning, like 6, 7 o'clock. I checked out of the KOA campground, and I don't think I just had like some granola bars that I had with me, had them for breakfast, and just headed south. I had more of an idea where I wanted to go. I had done some research and maps. I headed out south of Salt Lake City on my bike, and right away, once I get out of like, the kind of like bland suburban landscape, starts to heat up. I'm taking off my sweatshirts, sweatpants, just being in shirt and shorts. I'm out there, and it's becoming more like a desert kind of environment. I'm seeing all the red mountains around me. I'm heading down like these major roads, not an interstate, of course, but kind of major roads, and I'm just out there on my own, and the landscape is just beautiful. It's kind of like a desert landscape out there. I think I was already out of the valley, like kind of skirting along it, but west of it. So west of Salt Lake City is pretty much desert all the way to Nevada. There's not that much in terms of like towns. There's a town called Tulare, and then it's like some military stuff, testing grounds, things like that. Pretty much all the way to Wendover in Nevada. Now, I wasn't going that way because I heard that was a little rough. And you'd have to take the interstate, which isn't that safe. So anyway, I'm heading out south through like West Jordan, all those places, out of the valley. I'm heading south to Provo, which is another major city. Going through all this kind of desert landscape. I pass another couple cyclists, but pretty much I'm on my own for this whole day. And I start getting to Provo. I think in the late afternoon, I biked like, I think 60 to 70 miles that day. I'm kind of tired. I find another KOA campground. It's, I think, by the like Provo River Canyon or something like that. It was nice. Settled down there again. I set up my tent. I'm already used to this kind of stuff. And that was that day. It was just unbelievable being out there on my bike and seeing the mountains and the desert, and going from a cold night when I woke up in the early morning to 70, 80 degree weather just in my t-shirt, the wind against my face. Just awesome. And it only gets better. The next day, I check out of the campground and I decide I'm going east. I'm gonna go east, I think outside of the valley still. I don't remember exactly, but I was heading east from Provo to a town called Heber. And this was really like the most physically demanding day I've ever had. And I believe it was only 35 miles. Now, actually, I think I did have to go back into the valley again, downhill from Provo, like the Provo River Canyon or something like that, back into the valley and then out of it to go into Heber, which was outside of the valley. So think about it. I'm going, I believe it was like downhill in terms of elevation and then back uphill. So I did that. It was kind of like urban. When I'm in Provo in the morning, I'm passing by all these cars. I think at one point even, a policeman stopped me and told me a way to go where I'd avoid so much traffic. But once I got outside of Provo, it got really remote, at least from my standards. Maybe not for Utah standards, but certainly for somebody used to what I was used to. I'm back into this kind of like desert landscape and all these mountains, and not even, I'm on these kind of roads. They're still kind of like major roads, I guess, but not that much traffic. And I'm going uphill, I'm going downhill, and the uphills are really difficult for me. The downhills are great. Like, I'm going faster than I've ever been on a bike before. And you could just coast and coast and coast from these downhills. I mean, I'm just really out there. And it gets to a certain point where I'm not seeing gas stations, I'm not seeing towns, I'm not seeing like anything except the roads and the mountains. And that's what it is for this day. And like I said, it's not even like, it's probably like half of the distance that I traveled the day before. But I am so tired. And, I had made sure to carry some water with me. And I need the water because I'm getting fatigued. I'm getting thirsty frequently. And I had water with me. But I'm starting to get nervous that I'm going to run out of it. Because I don't know exactly where the next town is or how far. I think I was like Googling it, but like I said, I don't think I had a smartphone at that time, and things weren't as certain as they are now with this kind of stuff. I didn't know how long it was going to take me on the bike to get to the next town. So when I had bought my camping gear, I had, I had bought I think like some kind of water purification system if I needed to stop by a lake and get some water. And I found the lake, I think it was called like the Jordan Lake or something like that. And I think I took one of my like empty canisters and I filled it up with water and put in I tried to do the water purification thing that I had, but I wasn't completely confident in it. Anyway, it turns out towards the end of the afternoon, I'm cycling uphill, downhill, through all this kind of like barren environment, and I finally start seeing like a small town. I think it was called Daniel. And I'm so thirsty, and I stopped. There was like some kind of like landscaping center, and I just knocked on the door because there were no stores around. I didn't see any. And like 2 teenage girls just opened the door to this business. Didn't even sell like water or anything. And I just asked them if they had some water. I think I just said I'd been out on the road, and they got me some water bottles. I felt a little more confident. But there were no like hotels or campgrounds around me. And I got back on the road, and I am so tired. I mean, I had been 60, 70 miles or whatever the day before, all these like mountain roads today from, all the elevation, 35 miles today or so, with all these hills and mountains just really wore me out. And, I mean, I could barely like cycle that much. Like I'd cycle and then I'd stop. I've never felt so tired in my life. And, I'm really I want to stay in a campground again. And I think I'm getting in the vicinity of Heber. And I knew it because I started to see, more people and cars and businesses. And there was another cyclist on the road. And, I managed to stop him. And I'm like, hey, man, where's the next campground? And he's like, well, it's about 10 miles from here. And at that point, now you got to remember, we're already in October, so I know that a lot of campgrounds were closed, right? So I was kind of, even if somebody told me there was another one, I didn't know if it was I'd get to some remote area with a campground and it would turn out to be closed, and then what would I do? I'd have to sleep outside, which I didn't really want to do. So this guy says, it's another 10 miles. Hey, I'm heading in that direction. Or he told me which way to go. I think it was still around the Jordan Lake. But at that point, I knew I was close to Heber, or I was already in Heber at that point. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to chance it. I'm so tired. I found some little budget motel in Heber. I checked in there for the night. I mean, man, I remember I couldn't even stand to take a shower. I was so tired once I sat down. Like, I remember just getting into the lobby of this hotel and like sitting down, and it felt so amazing. And then when I got to my room, I'm a city kid, so like, what was that, like 2 days on the road? I mean, just watching TV again, and I got like some Pizza Hut or something. Like, it all felt so amazing just to be off the road at that time. And I'm just chilling out. Man, I was so tired. Like, it felt so great. I think I just remember just sitting on the floor in the hotel room, just watching TV and chilling out and, appreciating all these things. Probably those of you that do this stuff frequently would find this funny, especially since I'm not even at a campground. Anyway, next day was getting back on the bike, and I found out at some point, I think in the hotel, I was watching the local weather forecast, and I was checking the internet, and I found out there was actually a big storm coming through the whole Salt Lake City area, and that's unusual. It's a pretty dry place, I believe, but there was a big storm coming through, and this would affect my plans because I was flying out from Salt Lake City in a couple days back to New York, and the only way back to Salt Lake City, if I was to go through the bike, was to go through Cottonwood Canyon. This is all really high elevations, and I did not want to be caught in a storm on my bike in a canyon. So originally, I was planning to go from Heber to Park City, where the the Sundance Film Festival is, and to spend the night there, and then the next day go back to Salt Lake City. But I realized I was going to have to cut it short and not go to Park City. So I headed out from Heber. I remember it was a very sunny morning, 6, 7 in the morning when I checked out of the motel in Heber. And I headed off to Cottonwood Canyon, which is west of Heber. I went through a town, I think it was called Mission, kind of like one of these old towns, which now had resorts and things like that. I started to realize I was heading back to like a higher elevation. Started to see a lot of mountains heading back towards the valley. I guess because I'm heading back towards the valley now. Heber was east of it, or on the eastern ridge of it. And I see the sign for the Wasatch State Park. Okay, I thought, well, I'll head back into there to get through Cottonwood Canyon, and then I will bike through Cottonwood Canyon. And I think on the way in Mission, I had stopped at a bike store and I asked about this, and they were like, yeah, some people bike through Cottonwood Canyon. So I said, okay, well, I guess I'll do that. So I'm heading out of Mission on my bike this whole time, and I'm going into the Wasatch State Park. And now when I tell you the elevation was increasing, it was really increasing. Like, I'm going up like a real mountain. You know, this isn't hills. This is like a real mountain. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I mean, at some point I get off my bike. I cannot pedal up the bike anymore. I'm walking the bike up, and the elevation just keeps increasing. And like, you know, I kind of boxed myself into the corner at this point. Like, I had to go through the canyon to get back to Salt Lake City and the airport. I had to do this. But, I mean, I'm like, this is really going up in elevation. I mean, I didn't even really know what it was like to bike up high elevations before, even to drive up really high elevations. I had done a little bit of it in, like, you know, outside of San Francisco, I suppose, in the Muir Woods, but this was, I don't know, this felt different, especially on a bike. You know, I give up. I'm like, I cannot walk up this. Maybe I could have, but, you know, it's pretty tired also, you know, so I'm not going to say like, you know, I was Superman on this trip, but anyway, I start looking for a way to hitchhike up to the top of the mountain. And, you know, for the first time ever, another first for me, you know, I think I was sticking out my thumb or waving down people, you know, and I have my whole, like, big camping backpack, and, you know, I looked like a traveler. A bike helmet, you know, and, you know, these people stopped for me. They had an SUV, and, you know, they agreed to take me up the mountain. And they had the room for my bike in there. We threw the bike in the truck and had a nice drive up. And, like, this was something else. I don't know how many thousands of feet it was up the Wasatch. But I remember looking down, and this was like nothing I think I had ever seen before in terms of elevation. I mean, it's so high up, and these people are just driving up, and I can't believe how high it's going up. So they take me to the Brighton area, and they tell me there's a campground there, up in the Wasatch Park. So they take me there, drop me off, and I find the campground. I check in, and it's only like I think it's still the early afternoon by the time I get up there to the Brighton area. This is known for like ski resorts and things like that. I check into the campground, which was this real kind of like wild campground. There wasn't really a lot of people there. It was kind of off season already. Just in kind of like this isolated little area. This one place actually had a fire pit. I had basically the afternoon to just hang out. And what I did was I found a hiking trail up there in the mountains and just started hiking, like around there. This place was really wild. I'm on this trail, and at least I think it's wild. I kind of thought it was, and then I see, like, I passed by like a pregnant woman. There's all these mountain bikers past me, and they're just like, driving past me. I'm heading further and further into the forest, and there's a guy next to me. I start chatting him up. He tells me he's going to a place, he's a hunter, and he's going to a place called Desolation Lake, which is in the park. And he told me I think he had killed some deer out there. He had hung the skins up and let them dry, I believe, and I think he was going back to retrieve them. So I started hiking with him in the forest and get deeper and deeper into it. This place kind of resembles what you would think of like more like Rocky Mountains kind of feel. So whereas a couple days before, when I traveled out of Salt Lake City, that was kind of like a desert environment, like Nevada desert, red rocks kind of environment, barren, not a lot of trees, hot. Now I'm up in like kind of like a Rocky Mountain kind of feel, like what I would picture like the Rocky Mountains or Colorado looks like. Very forested, fir trees, as far as you can see, just very forested. And I'm just kind of hiked with this guy for a little bit. Now he's going to Desolation Lake, and I didn't want to scare him. I mean, I already have my campground, so at some point we parted ways, and I went back to, hike back through the forest, this trail, and went back to the campground. And, I'm like, well, another first for me. I'm going to try to make a fire. And, the evening is setting in. And let me tell you, it's getting really, really cold. Now, I'm up thousands of feet in elevation. It's October in Utah. And it is really getting cold. So I'm out there. I have a picnic table. I have the fire pit. And I had bought at Paragon, the camping store, I had bought like these big matches. And I used them. I got some twigs and sticks and, tried setting the fire. I used like pages from a guidebook to there's like tinder. And yeah, for the first time I set a fire. I got my little pot out, not weed, an actual cooking pot. I, took some packets of oatmeal I had. I got some water from the water bottles. I mixed them together in the pot and cooked them over the fire and made myself some oatmeal. So again, probably some of you who do this all the time for like your entire life are probably, you'd probably be laughing, but hey, this was the first time I did this, and it felt really cool. So, I cooked my own dinner over the fire that night. I mean, how great is that? It was pretty easy to set the fire, actually. It was very dry still at that time, even though the storm was on its way. So I spent the night in this campground in the Wasatch. This is definitely the most remote I had been to at that point, much more remote than places I was at in Maine, or even the other campgrounds I had been at in Utah. Now, it got really, really cold. And I mean, it must have been, I believe it was, I checked it, and it was below freezing that night. I remember at some point I had to get out of the tent to go to the bathroom, and it definitely felt like below freezing. It was pretty cold in the tent too, although my tent held up. I had a sleeping bag. I just remember my feet being cold. I slept with my boots on and socks. I have a great memory of, as I did in other nights that week, just being in the tent and reading. I didn't go on my phone that much. I remember reading one of Colin Thubron's books. I had it with me about traveling through Central Asia, and excuse me. Just being there in the tent and, feeling kind of snug, a little cold, but kind of snug, hearing the wind outside in the mountains, and, spending the night there in the Wasatch State Park in Utah. And I mean, just, again, how great is this? How great is this? All by myself, just my thoughts. And, I'll mention too, I throughout the trip to Maine and this trip, I hardly spoke with anybody. I think just the people at the campgrounds and a few words here and there. A couple people I met along the way, just a few sentences here and there. But for the most part, just by myself, not talking. I made some calls back home here and there. But for the most part, I'm on the road by myself, finding my own way, reading maps, getting lost, finding my way back onto roads, trying to be safe, avoiding all the shrapnel along the roads, hiking. I never was in a place before where I had to, really worry about wild animals. There were signs warning about bears and mountain lions and moose. Actually, I remember the hiker I was talking to, he told me he found moose to be the most dangerous of the animals out there. He had actually told me he had seen a mountain lion. Maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. But he was a nice guy. Still remember him. Hold on a second. I got to take a little break, and then I will continue. Okay, everybody. So, I'm back. All right. So, was Utah. On my way now. Like I said, I was detoured because of a big storm that was going through the area at that time, October 2012, through the canyon. People were telling me, don't put up with it. So I decided, instead of going from Heber into Park City through Cottonwood Canyon, that I would go directly from Cottonwood Canyon, stop in Cottonwood Canyon, and then ride my bike back into Salt Lake City, spend the day there, and then fly out. So now I spend the night in the canyon. Really cool. Like I said, woke up the next morning. For the second time, I made a fire again and used the pages of my guidebook as tinder. Had a nice fire going and cooked some oatmeal for myself again, which felt really good. There was some squirrels were getting into my oatmeal packets and trying to eat it, but that's okay. I don't blame them. So now I had the task of cycling. Now, like I said, I was at some serious elevation here, and I had to, or I thought I had to hitchhike my way up to Brighton through up thousands of feet in elevation. And now I need to get back down the mountain and back to Salt Lake City. So I decided to cycle down. I mean, it's downhill. It was kind of fun, except that being these winding mountain roads and that it was such a steep elevation, I felt like I constantly had to brake or stop. But nonetheless, it wasn't too bad. It was a lot of fun, actually, at some points, going down the whole elevation, going down the mountain. And once I pretty much got down out of the mountain, I believe I was like, right back into Salt Lake City and out of the Wasatch State Park. So I have this whole day, and it's like halfway through, and I'm back in the Salt Lake Valley. I don't think I was actually in Salt Lake City, but one of the suburbs in the valley. And I just spent really most of the rest of the day just crisscrossing Salt Lake City on my bike, going through different towns, suburbs, neighborhoods. It was a lot of fun, not as eventful or scenic. And I had a plan at one point. I was thinking of cycling out like 30 or something miles to this big copper mine that was on the outskirts of the valley. But I didn't really see a safe way of getting there on my bike if I was just going to take my bike out there. And then I considered going out to the actual area of the Salt Lake, seeing the Salt Lake, and there was an island there called Antelope Island, which supposedly has all kinds of animals and things like that. And there's even a campground there. I called the campground, and they said they were still open, but I couldn't find a route there that would involve just cycling. So I really just wanted to stay on the bike. I didn't really want to take cabs and things like that. So I just spent the rest of the day cycling around Salt Lake, back and forth, and I found, again, the KOA campground and settled there again for the night. And the next day, I just gave a day to just see the actual Salt Lake City. I went to the state capitol building. I took a tour of Brigham Young's house, learned about him, learned about the Mormons. I went to the temple, the Great Mormon Temple there, or LDS Temple. They call themselves the Church of Latter-day Saints. People there, they try to talk to you, bring you into the church. It was really something, learning about how they built the temple. It took something like 40 years, all the effort, all the people who came out from far away from England. They took a ship. They took one of these wagons before there were cars out to Salt Lake City. How all these pioneers just started this whole project out there in Salt Lake Valley, like a New Jerusalem to them, and got their religion going, and all the effort that went into it. I went to some kind of like pioneer museum and looked at the artifacts that these people brought and that they used, and it was all so amazing, the dedication of the early Mormon converts and how they built this whole society out there. And the Mormons are still a big part of Utah. Not so much in Salt Lake City, which I don't think is a Mormon majority city, but they are a big presence there. And they're a big presence in Provo, where Brigham Young University is. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, definitely recommend the tours. So just another day by myself, sitting in the Capitol steps and looking at the red mountains around me and getting ready to head back to New York City the next day, and everything went well. But so these were my 2 trips that were kind of inspired by the things that I had seen with Into the Wild and On the Road, and just my desire to really step outside what I had normally done for a trip or a vacation, and experience the outdoors, experience sleeping outdoors, setting up a tent, making a fire, going to campgrounds, navigating unfamiliar places, being on my own, the solitude of these places, the solitude of the West. I really believe there is a mystique about it, and it's very true what the mystique of the West being this place of wide open spaces and mountains and isolated places and long distances. For me, it's all true. And I was in what's considered a metropolitan area pretty much. I didn't really leave the Salt Lake Valley area. Even Heber, I know people commute into Salt Lake City from there. But this place was so wild to me, and I can't even imagine how much more wild and isolated it gets once you go way east of the valley or west of the valley to Nevada. I could picture you're really on your own out there. But it's just so great. Everything about it, the mountains and the forests, the change in temperature, days that were hot, days that were cold. The relief of finding campgrounds. There were plenty of times I got lost. I had to find my way around and ask people for directions. So I think I kept the inspiration from Chris, from just my own ideas. In a few months after my trip to Utah, I quit the work that I had been doing for the past 8 years, and I embarked as an entrepreneur. And for me, that's real. That's where it really got started for me in so many ways. I don't think I want to talk about it online. I think I'd probably rather put it into a book. I think that would do it more justice and possibly make me some money. I think there's a great story in that to be told about my experience as an entrepreneur in New York City. And I think a lot of people will enjoy it, and maybe it'll inspire them and they'll learn things from it. So that's my story of Maine and Utah. And, I unfortunately lost the photos from it, but it would be great if I still had them and had a way of getting them and could show you all these sights and sounds. It's, just a few days, but again, remember, here I am a few days out of all my days, and here I am still talking about it, still reminiscing over it, still remembering it, a lot of it like it was yesterday. And unfortunately, I probably have forgotten a lot of it, and I can't put all it out there visually. But if you like this, give it a like, and maybe other people will like it. So that's it for now. Take care.